Well, this is what losing looks like to the Trump administration, its Department of Justice. We've got a new breaking order coming out from the Middle District of Tennessee in the Abrego Garcia criminal case. Judge Crenshaw isn't having it. And even though it's been reported that this order is just about the judge ordering discovery and an evidentiary hearing, a trial against the Department of Justice on vindictive prosecution, it's much more than that, folks. I'm going to analyze it for you. I'm going to post it on Legal AF Substack, but here's the headline. Judge Crenshaw believes that there is at least a reasonable basis to believe that the federal government has either committed actual vindictive prosecution or, at the very least, presumptive vindictive prosecution. Either one is a get out of jail free card for Abrego Garcia. And more importantly, it provides the blueprint of a winning strategy that all of the targets of Donald Trump's ire and vindictiveness can use, like FBI Director Comey, Senator Schiff, Attorney General Letitia James. Anybody who's a target has a built-in vindictive prosecution motion, and this new order is going to be ultimately a nail in the coffin of the Trump administration when it comes to vindictive prosecution. Let's get down to it. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, to remind you, from El Salvador originally, in the country legally, pursuant to a number of orders of the immigration judges, including giving him a work permit when he was captured off the streets of Maryland and without due process sent to El Salvador in the middle of the night in violation of an order that he had against being removed to El Salvador because of violence against himself and his family. And then we started the Kafkaesque odyssey. His lawyers obtained not one, but 4 different orders all the way up to the United States Supreme Court 9-0. Every court that Abrego Garcia has been in, he has won, including in criminal court. And he gets an order in April requiring from the Supreme Court his immediate return for due process grounds to Maryland. Instead, in response to Judge Zinnes in Maryland telling the Department of Justice that his rights have likely been violated, that of Abrego Garcia, they then indict off a manufactured set of charges off a traffic stop from 3 years ago where he didn't even get a ticket, indict him for human smuggling. And what the judge is considering is a pending motion to dismiss for vindictive prosecution. The vindictive prosecution part is the only reason that the prosecution or the indictment was brought against Abrego Garcia is because he had the temerity, the courage to raise his constitutional rights in front of Judge Zinnes in Maryland, his due process rights, which were affirmed by the Supreme Court, and that in retaliation led to the prosecution. If any of that is true, his indictment will be dismissed by Judge Crenshaw. The new order had to do with whether certain limited discovery, which is new information obtained by the moving party, the party that files the motion to support their motion to dismiss, is going to be ordered. And will there be an evidentiary hearing, a mini trial on the issue? The judge answered that in the affirmative, that under precedent of the appellate court that he reports to, he has to give discovery. In other words, sit for deposition, sit for sworn statements, Department of Justice, because you're going to have to, based on the requirements of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the judge is going to have to hold a mini trial on the issue. But it went more than that. Let me read to you what the judge said. Here's the takeaway. Todd Blanche screwed up the case because he accidentally told the truth on Fox News to Laura Ingraham. Let me repeat that. The entirety of the judge's decision turns on statements, effectively a confession made by Todd Blanche on Fox News when he put it together out loud. The reason that we're indicting is because a Maryland judge criticized us on due process grounds, so we indicted. It is that "so we indicted" part that is the basis of either actual vindictiveness, which is one way to prove the defense and get the case dismissed, or presumptive vindictiveness. Either one leads to the dismissal of the indictment. Actual vindictiveness is if you can get actual evidence, like an email exchange internally, in which they said, we're going to screw this guy because he raised his due process constitutional rights in front of Judge Zinnes. Let's get him indicted in Tennessee. It's very hard to find that smoking gun, but sometimes it happens. That's why the law also recognizes presumptive. And presumptive is when a reasonable person looking at the facts, including the timing of the indictment, conclude that it presumptively is vindictive. That's enough. The judge also ruled in this order that the burden has shifted to the Department of Justice. They now have to prove that they did not vindictively prosecute Abrego Garcia, which is going to be very difficult to do. Let me show you, because I bring the receipts here on Legal AF on Saturday. Let me show you the clip, the actual clip the judge relied on to conclude that it is very likely that Abrego Garcia will be able to make out either actual vindictiveness or presumptive. Let me show you the clip, then we'll talk about it. Run the clip.
So this had nothing to do with Judge Boasberg's decision, which I thought was, over the top. Supreme Court saying, you got to try to facilitate the return. So you're saying tonight that the warning of possible contempt charges against administration officials, none of that had anything to do with the investigation?
No, I mean, first of all, the Supreme Court stayed any contempt proceedings by Judge Boasberg. That case has been stayed. In this case, we had a judge in Maryland tell us that, oh no, there's not any evidence that he's a member of MS-13. You had no right to deport him. And so what should we do as a Department of Justice when a judge is accusing us of doing something wrong? We have an obligation to everybody, including you, to investigate it. And that's exactly what we did. And so the reason why he was returned and the facilitation that brought him back here is not a judge. It's an arrest warrant issued by a grand jury from the Middle District of Tennessee, charging him with 2 counts of very serious charges involving 9 years of smuggling aliens all over this country, from Texas to Maryland and other states. That's why he's back. And that's why the government of El Salvador agreed to bring him back, because of a federal arrest warrant.
That's Todd Blanche, the number 2 in the Department of Justice, Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer and running the criminal division. So here's what the judge said about all of that. He says on page 7 of the order, actual vindictiveness may be apparent based on the defendants and their subordinate statements about Abrego from the time he filed his Maryland lawsuit, that's with Judge Zinnes, through his arrest in this district in Tennessee. While many of the statements made by the defendants about Abrego raise cause for concern, you've got Kristi Noem, he's a criminal, he's a pedophile, he's a gangbanger, he'll never see the light of day again. Pam Bondi, Attorney General, the same thing. Tom Homan, head of Border Czar, same thing. But the judge says, while many said many things, one stands out amongst the rest. Deputy Attorney General Blanche, the DOJ official responsible for overseeing the criminal division, and overseeing the acting U.S. attorney for Tennessee, told the public on television on the day of Abrego's arrest that the government started investigating Abrego after, quote, a judge in Maryland questioned the government's decision to deport Abrego and found that it had no right to deport him, and accused the government of doing something wrong. You saw the clip. That's what the judge saw. To remove any doubt, Deputy Attorney General said the criminal case was brought to return Abrego to the United States, not because of a judge, but instead because of an arrest warrant issued by a grand jury in the Middle District of Tennessee. This, the judge concludes, could be direct evidence of vindictiveness. Very hard to get. He then went on, though, and said, if it doesn't support that, it certainly supports presumption. On page 10, the executive official defendants and their subordinates' public statements about Abrego further demonstrates the burden he imposed upon them. Indeed, Deputy Attorney General Blanche directly ties the Homeland Security investigation into Abrego's Maryland suit. Kilmar Abrego was indicted on a very serious charge, and you saw the clip on Fox News. The timing of the indictment, which goes to presumptive vindictiveness elements is also in Abrego Garcia's favor. He says on page 13, Judge Crenshaw, the timing of Abrego's indictment suggests a realistic likelihood that senior DOJ and Department of Homeland Security officials may have induced acting U.S. Attorney McGuire to criminally charge Abrego in retaliation for his Maryland suit. He was stopped in November of 2022 at a traffic stop. The Homeland Security put it to bed in March of 2025, yet 3 days later, on March 15, 2025, the executive branch made the unilateral decision to remove Abrego to El Salvador. He filed his suit on March 24th. 2 weeks later, he obtained a federal injunction. The Fourth Circuit and Supreme Court sided with Abrego on April 7 and April 10. And then you get the indictment. Now you may also remember that in Middle District of Tennessee, we had one of those U.S. attorney types that resigned in protest, one of the first. We've now had it in the Eastern District of Virginia, but we had it there first. So on page 8, on footnote 1, this is what the judge concludes. It may be that Deputy Attorney General Blanche's opinion, the one we saw in the video, distressed the former chief of the criminal division of the Middle District of Tennessee's U.S. Attorney's Office, Ben Schrader. It is alleged that Mr. Schrader resigned on May 21, 2025, the day Abrego was indicted, because of what some have suggested were his concerns that this case was being pursued for political reasons. And then the judge concludes as follows. It's not only that, and that's why I wanted to kind of really do a deep dive here. It's not the sort of cursory top line headline by the news media, discovery ordered. It's not that. It's that the entire case has shifted in Abrego Garcia's head. What the judge concludes on page 15 is, in sum, Abrego has carried his burden of demonstrating some evidence that the prosecution against him may be vindictive, presumptively or actually. Now it shifts back to the government. Big burden shifting device that happened here. The government bears the burden of rebutting the presumption with objective, on-the-record explanations, sworn testimony, such as governmental discovery of previously unknown evidence or previous legal impossibility. What does that mean? That means now the burden rests on the shoulders of the government to prove they're not being vindictive. And they have to do it with actual evidence and sworn testimony, which includes, and the judge gave some suggestions like, well, if you found new evidence that hadn't been around before he asserted his due process rights, I may listen to that. Or if you had some sort of reason you couldn't bring the prosecution earlier, but if you don't have that, you're dead in the water. And I'm likely, after a trial, to dismiss the indictment. That's where I really think this is going. So we're going to have, the judge is going to hold a hearing next week. Going to talk about the narrow scope of the discovery. The discovery is going to get issued. It's going to get responded to. There's going to be a couple of depositions because you can't do a trial with affidavits, which are written sworn statements. And then sometime, I assume in October, November, there's going to be a trial, a mini trial. And I think this indictment gets dismissed. In the meantime, Abrego Garcia turned himself in to ICE in Maryland, where he sits. He's under the auspices and the jurisdiction of Judge Zinnes, who has ordered that he remain, I think he's in Virginia, in a Virginia detention center under her control until all this stuff gets sorted out in Tennessee. I don't see a trial in Tennessee. I see a dismissal of the indictment. The other update is I think an immigration judge has ruled for now that Abrego Garcia is not entitled to asylum, but I think it's something that Judge Zinnes, as a federal judge, if she determines there's been an abuse of his due process and an abuse of his constitutional rights, I think she can award him asylum as part of her equitable powers. And I think we're heading rapidly to that conclusion. Just have to get this Tennessee matter resolved. I'm glad you're here. Take a moment. If you like this kind of work, this kind of analysis, we do about 10 videos a day. We got the Legal AF podcast. We've got the Legal AF Substack, where we do lives every day. twice a day. We've got some amazing written content there and commentary by our contributors. Come over to Legal AF Substack, consider becoming a paid member at $6 or $7 a month, and hit the subscribe button here on Legal AF, the YouTube channel. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touches Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event, by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states, and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.